I'm Chris Carter. This is the Locked On Steelers podcast, and today, the Pittsburgh Steelers report to training camp. We get you ready for all that excitement by talking with Mike DeFabo of The Athletic. It's going to be a fun conversation, talking Russell Wilson, potential hold-ins, players with the most pressure, all his training camp set to begin. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Mike DeFabo from The Athletic. He's back. He's been on a sabbatical for a little bit. We ain't had him on. He got married. He went on the honeymoon, traveled on across the world. But we're happy to have him back. And Mike, you must be so happy to be going back to your home in Latrobe instead of being in Italy.
Yeah, Latrobe, Italy, pretty much the same thing. But I will tell you the one similarity between those two places: some delicious Italian food. Because I have family in Latrobe, very, very Italian. Actually, Rizzo's restaurant in Crabtree. If you've ever been, I have some family connections there. So I will be eating good, lots of Italian food when I'm in Latrobe for training camp. And definitely my wings. You know, you got to hit up Sharky's and Dino's. I'm a huge chicken wing guy. I was actually thinking, Chris, not to get us off on the wrong track, but
it's fine.
A Steelers media wing eating competition, and the judge is Mike Tomlin, and all he does is go, "There's a lot of meat on that bone."
You're terrible.
I think we should do it, Chris. I think I could hold my own.
I think both of us could. I think both of us would do very well. I wonder who would win. That's a topic for another day. Who would win? I feel like Mark Caboli would be up there.
We could do something for charity. You know, people could support us or donate a certain amount for each wing that we ate. I think we could do this for a good cause, and I'm serious about getting Tomlin involved.
Listen, Tomlin loves him some wings, so I'm sure he'd be down with that. We just got to make sure no arm wrestling at this fundraiser.
Oh,
Inside Steelers media joke. Anyways, let's talk about camp coming up. Mike, I want to talk about Russell Wilson because I feel like that's still like we'll talk about the offensive line. We'll get into guys with holdings. There's all these other questions, but everything has to have Russell Wilson playing better at quarterback for the Steelers than they've had since maybe even 2020 Ben Roethlisberger. And so that's where I think a lot of this comes down to. And I think the first glimpses that the Steelers fans will get to see of him are 7 shots when he's working against the defense. And it's going to be those moments where we see the smallest miss of an incomplete pass or the biggest touchdown of a pass be heralded online when it gets posted on Twitter. So I wanted to get your opinion. What are your expectations for how Russell Wilson will get it started training camp and how you expect things to go with him running the offense?
Yeah, well, you know, Mike Tomlin has termed it that he's in pole position, but to me, it really seems like Russell Wilson has already taken the starting job. And I think it would take something pretty dramatic for him not to start week 1. You know, so I would expect that he takes the overwhelming majority of the first team reps, even some of the second team reps from time to time. In a situation like 7 shots, I bet he'll probably end up taking 4, probably of those reps on average during each time. And for me, you know, I think that there's reasons for optimism with Russell Wilson. You know, I think that they're not going to ask a lot out of him. He's going to be supported significantly by the running game. And I think that this offense is going to look quite similar to what Russell Wilson was successful in Seattle early in his career. And then for me, the big question is just, how much can you add a different dimension with play action passing? And we know that Russell Wilson is known for that big moon shot deep ball. And right. I like the fact that you have a deep threat in George Pickens that he can unlock. So I think those are all the reasons for confidence and optimism. My one question is, you know, Arthur Smith traditionally has really liked to target the middle of the field. And Russell Wilson, conversely, That's not an area where he's particularly successful. So
Right.
I think if there's one reason for a bit of hesitation or a bit of skepticism, it's in how those two guys will mesh together when it doesn't seem like necessarily the quarterback is his skill set and what he likes to do necessarily meshes with what the offensive coordinator likes to run.
Absolutely. That's a big question. We've covered a lot of these questions throughout the offseason.
Right.
Will he throw to the middle part of the field? Who will he develop rapport with? But I do think it's going to be interesting to see how Russell Wilson works, because one of the things that we all document is how 7 shots go, right? Because that's like the fun part to start practice. After they've gotten their warm-ups in, the offense plays the defense, they line up at the 2, and they get 7 straight chances. And how well Russell Wilson does in these, I think could at least start I guarantee you there will be lots of talk throughout training camp about how that goes, how well he does or how poor he does, and how that plays into things. But like Russell Wilson also isn't necessarily like, a super red zone quarterback. He's more so like the guy that manages you down the field. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see the early portion of that, where these first 7 shots, they'll be all without pads. They'll be, so like they'll have to throw the ball. There won't be any running. But when the pads go on, man, I'm excited to see what happens in the red zone, because then you can run the ball, you can run play action, you can do bootlegs. It starts to get really interesting for the guys who are trying to prove a point and show that they belong as a starter on this team.
Right, definitely. And that's an element that has been a part of Russell Wilson's game in the past, has been using his legs, his mobility, his escapability to his advantage, whether that be extending plays or just straight up scrambling. And so that is a dimension that you're not necessarily going to see in training camp, and you're going to have to wait for in-game situations, because obviously quarterbacks aren't live during these things. So, that's another, I guess, different element that Russell Wilson brings, and something that I think will show itself, especially in the red zone. Instead of just throwing for it, I think he is one of those quarterbacks that loves to scramble and loves to take off himself and just do it, with his legs.
If they can get a guy that can balance that with throwing the ball and also with playing within the offense itself, because that's the other part of this, is Arthur Smith is constructing a full offense that's not going to be overly reliant on one player's talents. It's going to try to balance things out. If Russell Wilson understands that, is in sync with that, and can be the guy that gets the ball in the right place, even if that's as simple as just checking into the handoff at the right moment, I think that goes a long way for this offense. And to me, that'll be a very big part of what Russell Wilson gets to do this season, is if he is in sync and making the right calls and making the right decisions, everything else will flow smoothly, and it won't require him to be some amazingly accurate quarterback if he's just making the right calls most of the time.
Yeah, and I think that you're seeing, at least what I noticed through OTAs and mandatory minicamp, is that even though Russell Wilson might not be Pro Bowl Russell Wilson in his prime, he still shows that he's been in this league for a long time, and he's a veteran, whether that's tangible or intangible things. I think that his accuracy, for example, really was improved compared to Kenny Pickett, and he's getting the guys the ball on time and on target. Then you're seeing him do things like, there was one practice I remember walking into the locker room, and he's out there talking to George Pickens about how he wants him to bend a certain route just a certain way, a little bit different. Understanding the playbook, but then also what he wants out of his receivers and having the leadership qualities to articulate that to them is also a big piece of what he brings in. Mike Tomlin talked about pool position, and we've kind of made that a big joke, and it's become funny. But part of the reason why that they've even done that and named a guy as the presumptive starter or the guy ahead in the lead is so that they could organize these offseason workouts, and something that Russell Wilson has done. Right. You've seen things on social media. So, again, I don't think that you need him to be a guy that's Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. You need him to be more closely to a game manager. And the other part here is he has sometimes been accused of being risk averse and taking too many sacks or throwing the ball way too much. Or there was the let Russ cook big movement because they felt like they were taking the ball out of his hands by the play calling. And so it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that dynamic between risk and reward, because I think that Mike Tomlin, the Steelers in the past, it seems, have wanted a guy actually who protects the football above all else. And let's keep the game in the hands of the defense and have them win it on offense don't take too many risks and don't lose it for us. I think that Russell Wilson's skill set and his mentality and approach would marry well with that dimension that seems to have been a point of emphasis in the past.
Absolutely. I want to talk about more aspects of training camp, not just Russell Wilson, and that includes players who might be in position for hold-ins. What will happen there, and players with the most pressure on them. We'll get into all of that here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter with Mike DeFabo. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you can download right to your phone so you can get tickets to whatever event you want without it being stressful. Game Time gets you all your tickets to your favorite sporting events and so much more. With it being summertime, it's baseball season, so you can get tickets to see your favorite ball club play at their next game wherever you are with Game Time. Whether you're in Pittsburgh and you want to see rookie phenom Paul Skeens pitch his next game on the mound for the Pirates, or you're in Los Angeles and want to see Shohei Ohtani be the world sensation that he is for the Dodgers, Game Time has got you wherever you go. Download Game Time today on your own. It's a fast and easy way to book tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. You can even get killer deals on last-minute tickets, so you can save up to 60% off buying tickets on the last minute for sports, concerts, and so many more events. They also have a best price guarantee where if you find a price that's better than what you see on Game Time in the same section of row for less somewhere else, Game Time credits you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to the website GameTime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Mike DeFabo, Steelers reporter at The Athletic. Mike, let's talk about hold-ins for a second here, because this is something that the Steelers dealt with a little bit with Cam Heyward going into OTAs, and then eventually he showed up and he was fine there. But Cam Heyward isn't the only guy that's looking for a future contract with the Steelers right now. Prominent guys, of course, of note are guys like Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth, two offensive players drafted the same year who are looking for their next deal with the team. And I look at that and I wonder, man, what's going to be the plan for the Steelers and how they attack this? And would any of these players be guys who hold in? And again, for those who might be like, what's a hold in versus a hold out? Hold out is when you don't show up at all. Hold in is when you do show up, but then you kind of stand off to the side. You do your own little workouts, but it's not like you're against the team too much, because that's, again, what TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Alex Highsmith, and Deontay Johnson have all done and gotten contracts through doing that. Mike, do you anticipate any of these guys doing it, or do you think because these guys were mostly showing up to OTAs and minicamp that it's not going to be an issue for the Steelers this time around?
Yeah, it's a good question, Chris. And I'm mostly guessing right now. We're trying to make an informed guess based on what we've seen. I think the guy that may be most likely to do it would be Cam Heyward. And just because of the fact that, he decided to bring his contract situation to a head and do so publicly by holding out of OTAs. And maybe at that point he was thinking, let me try to get ahead of this. Let me try to draw some attention to it, come to a resolution so it doesn't become an issue in camp. Well, here's camp right now, and right now they don't have a clear solution to this. And so I do wonder if he decides that his best approach is to hold in, or if he has conversations with Mike Tomlin and Mike Tomlin says, look, you're a veteran of this team, a leader, we need you out there. As for the others, I don't think that Najee Harris or Pat Freiermuth really have a case, and I don't think they can really strengthen their case by holding in. I think Pat Freiermuth, traditionally, this would be when the Steelers would extend him. He's going into the last year of his rookie contract. The issue with him is he's really, at least from a pure production standpoint, not produced at the level that you would hope.
Right.
You look at last year, he was 32nd among tight ends in receiving yards with just over 300, and a significant chunk of that came in one game against the Cincinnati Bengals. In terms of pure raw receptions, he was 28th among tight ends. So not one of those upper echelon guys, but the question with him is always, how much was he hurt by Matt Canada calling the plays and Kenny Pickett throwing the football? And I think significantly. And he goes from an offense like that to one that Arthur Smith, you could argue, is the coordinator who used the tight end more than anybody. The Atlanta Falcons led the league last year in receiving yards by tight ends. They led the league in 12 and 13 personnel usage. So if I'm Pat Freiermuth, I look at all this and I think, look, am I going to get a contract or am I not? I don't know. But this might turn into a contract year. So I need to develop a fast relationship with Russell Wilson, something that's already started. I need to be out there working here, proving that I'm the second most reliable receiving threat other than George Pickens. So that's what I think. If I were advising Pat Freiermuth, what I would be thinking. And then as for Najee Harris, I think he's in a similar situation where this, I think, is going to turn into a prove-it year for him. And I think that he's better off getting out there and practicing than, trying to convince the Steelers that by holding in that they need to extend him. It seems to me like they've already made their decision with Najee Harris. And even though Omar Khan may have gone on some radio stations and said the door is still open for an extension, you had your opportunity to keep this guy on an affordable contract. To me, your actions say more than the words. And right now, I think that that chapter may be closing on Najee Harris.
It very well could be. It's something that we've talked about, and and who knows? If he balls out this year, do they give him an extension? Do they work something out?
Franchise him always. There's ways to keep him.
Right. There's so many different ways to keep him on the roster. And again, if they want to do that, because we also know Omar Khan, whereas he said that, he also told us to our faces at the combine that, they had full faith in Kenny Pickett, and then they signed Russell Wilson a couple days later and traded away Kenny Pickett like a week after that. So, you always have to kind of, take notes when we're hearing guys talk about that. But we also know that the Steelers, they've been trending more towards, what does the league value as far as what, how they make their decisions and how they move around. That's how they've kind of gotten what they've gotten in the draft. So maybe they look at running back and they say running back's not valued at that high. So there's no need to pay Najee Harris more than what they think that they have to if they can base it off the market. So I'd be interested to see where that's at there. But I'm with you on both Harris and Freiermuth. I think both of them have to prove things this year versus the Steelers having, like when Deontay Johnson was doing his holding, he was the best receiver on the team. Like everyone's like, okay, he's one of the better route runners in the NFL. TJ Watt, they needed him. Alex Highsmith, they needed him. It would be nice for them to have Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris, but like if they were off the team, it's not like either of them have been all-pro players yet. And I think that both of them have potentials to be among the best at their positions in the NFL if things work out. But I'm with you that I don't think either of them have the leverage to do that. I think if there is someone on this team that could do that, it is Cam Heyward. But I'm not so sure that he does that with, considering that he did show up to OTAs and minicamp at the end of it all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, any one of the three theoretically could hold in, though. It's kind of a matter of, it's not what we think or what the Steelers think. It's what that player and their agent believe. And so we'll have to wait and see with that, But, as for like Najee, I think it's very interesting with him, that a couple of years ago he was talking about, I'd tell Jalen Warren, don't practice to be the backup, practice to take my job. Well, now you wonder what the next evolution of this is going to be. And if the Steelers – the company line is that they wanted to see what Najee Harris looked like in Arthur Smith's offense before giving him an extension. Right. But it does make you wonder if there's maybe something more to it.
I do think that there could be something else there, and that's certainly something the Steelers are looking at there. But, between that, I do think that it should keep hold ins out of the equation for the most part this year. And it might put guys in more of the position of they need to prove it this year. And I want to talk about more guys that do need to prove it this year at Steelers training camp. We'll get more into that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Mike DeFabo, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because of the eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the price that you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, here with Chris Carter, here with Mike DeFabo. Mike, let's talk about some of the players with most pressure on them right now. We kind of talked over the big one that I think everyone acknowledged. It's Najee Harris. If there's one player who has to prove something, even though he's had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, he has not had the stellar season yet that has kind of shown, hey, he is one of the best running backs in the NFL with one standout year. I think it's been his consistency and his persistence to be able to fight through injuries and to stay healthy through all this that has made him very valuable. But if he wants a big contract to either stay in his team or to earn a big contract in free agency, this is the year that now he's got the offensive line. They've got a better coordinator. They have, what they think will be better quarterback play. This is his chance to shine and show, even if it's not to the Steelers, but show to the NFL that he's worth a significant contract after this rookie deal runs out.
Yeah, and you've seen for game-changing type of backs, the league change its stance just a bit. Like guys like Saquon Barkley getting huge contracts, but by the same token, there's also a number of running backs who are talented and weren't able to find a home. So it will be interesting to see what his market is. And I agree with you, Chris. Like from week 9 until the end of the season, since Najee Harris came to the league 3 years ago, no running back has accumulated more yardage. And so he's been a fantastic second half player. And a lot of that speaks to his durability and his availability. But by the same token, I think everyone would agree the last 2 seasons at least, he's underwhelmed the first half and people were having questions about him. And, he gets a lot of criticism. From the moment he was drafted, people were like, you shouldn't draft a running back in the first round. And I'm sensitive to that. I understand that there's a lot of pressure on a guy like Najee and he's always under the microscope. But right now, as you're mentioning, Chris, like, it's time for him to show consistency from week 1 and prove that he can be that back weeks 1 through 17, not just the second half of season. And right now, as you're mentioning, there are no more excuses. The offensive line is better. The coordinator's better. Really, it's just a matter of can he produce from week 1 and carry it through the rest of the season. And absolutely, I think he's at the top of the list of guys with something to prove this year.
I think another player, maybe not as loudly as Najee Harris, but does have a lot to prove is Calvin Austin. Now, we've heard good things about Calvin Austin from Zach Azzanni, Steelers wide receivers coach, who said that he's really improved even in just what he saw from when Azzanni took over to now. But I think that this is still a year where Austin has to show that he's still going to, because the Steelers just drafted another wide receiver in Roman Wilson. They're probably going to draft another one next year. Just the way the NFL works, you always want to reload at wide receiver with the pace of things. And if Calvin Austin, with next year being his last year on his deal, this will be his 3rd year in the league. He's in a position where I think he has to prove himself, because at the same time, his next contract is due the same time as George Pickens. And if George Pickens is that guy, what would they pay Calvin Austin? And, Austin already has the struggle of he missed an entire season due to injury in his rookie years. So I think he's another guy that also needs to really show up this year, especially in training camp.
Yeah, I think we both agree on that, Chris. And the way I look at him is like, he missed his rookie year. Last year, when he got the ball in his hands in punt return situations, I thought he was very dynamic and made guys miss. You saw the speed. And then I think he was just another guy you could lump into the category of how do you evaluate him when Kenny Pickett's throwing the football and Matt Canada is calling the plays.
Right.
And so, the question for me is Calvin Austin a one-trick pony? Is he just a punt return guy and he's kind of already reaching his ceiling? Or is this the year he takes this significant step forward and proves that he's going to be the number 2, number 3 wide receiver on this depth chart? And, he's going to use his speed and use the fact that if you get the ball to him in unique ways, he can create after the catch. I think that there's a real opportunity for Calvin Austin. And I think I would even go as far as to say he's one of the true X factors on this offense. And if he ascends, then you're looking at a pretty well-rounded, dynamic offense. And if he doesn't, then you're looking at a situation where you're wondering, man, this is a pretty thin receiver core without a lot of answers.
Yeah, I think that they need answers there themselves. And so if you're in the situation where your contract's coming out soon, you need to be some of those answers. Roman Wilson can have a bad year this year and bounce back next year.
Right.
Like he's a rookie. He's on a 4-year deal. There's nothing wrong with that. Calvin Austin, he had his year where he was injured, and last year I'll even say I thought Calvin Austin did all right for what he was tasked with. But this year he has to do more than just all right, because again, the wide receiver position is so redraftable with the way college football works and all the players that are being churned out there every single year. I mean, heck, Steelers fans were talking about, getting Roman Wilson, in the 3rd round, or getting guys later than that, and guys that, people are hoping can become, number 2, number 3 wide receivers on your team and be really productive. So, in fact, I talked about this on our Monday episode with a question from a caller. But it's not that wide receivers is devalued as running back. It's just that there's so many wide receivers that come out of college that are all fast, or really have really good hands, or run really good routes, or are just, really athletic. Those kind of guys, they keep coming back around. And because of that, I think that it forces guys like Calvin Austin to have to step up and show, hey, I'm worth a veteran contract that's going to eat up part of your salary cap.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Calvin Austin is going to face competition in camp from guys like Van Jefferson is going to be trying to steal reps from him. Even other guys, that they have, Quez Watkins and so forth. There's other options for them. But you also, whether it's sooner or later, whether it is this big trade that we've been wondering if it could materialize to bring in a wide receiver, if that happens during training camp, or next year at a minimum, there's going to be another talented wide receiver on this roster for you to compete with. And as you're mentioning, Chris, is he going to find a way to separate himself? And that's really the big question for him. And again, I think a great opportunity for him as it stands right now.
Absolutely. Who's another player, Mike, that you have on your list? I have DeMarvin Leal as one guy. I think that he absolutely needs to. It's his 3rd year.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's also other guys. I mean, we could go through the litany of free agents and traded guys they brought in who are on 1-year deals: Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Dante Jackson. I feel like those are all obvious ones, but there are other guys that you have your eyes on that you're like, man, this guy better show up this year or he won't be around much longer.
Yeah, I mean, it is funny when you start having this discussion, you could almost name any guy on the roster. I think Pat Freiermuth is near the top of the list. I mean, I even look at a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick as a guy having some pressure on him. Last year he had injuries that held him back, and he, for the first time in a really long time, had no turnovers, didn't intercept any passes, didn't force any fumbles, didn't recover any fumbles. And they've talked during this offseason about how they're going to deploy him more in his traditional role as a deep middle field free safety. And so it's like they're trying to put him in positions to be that impact game-changing player. And if he's not, then, I mean, I don't think he's still going to be on the team, obviously. But like, this was a guy that at one point you talked about as the best safety in the entire league. And now in those rankings, he's starting to fall back a bit. Can he reclaim his position and have people still believe that he is that game-changing force on defense? And you're going to need him to be. TJ Watt did a lot last year, and but for this defense to truly be special and to be dynamic, you're going to need to have. It's going to be like the old days when you had Troy Polamalu and James Harrison, both Defensive Player of the Year candidates on the same defense.
Right.
I think that's what you're going to need with this defense if you're going to count on them to carry you into the postseason.
That's a very good point to bring up too. Is we tend to look at the players who are trying to just earn a spot and trying to prove that they're good. But what about the players, long term for the Steelers? That's just as important to what they're doing here, because I look at the Steelers and I look at, man, like, wait a second. Let's see, like, you look at how their roster could be constructed moving forward. Yeah, they have $77.2 million in cap space next year, and it opens up even more after that. But Omar Khan is constantly looking at about who's going to be available, who's the top guys to be considered here, and if he finds new pieces, you could become quickly obsolete in the NFL if you're getting paid what Minkah Fitzpatrick's going to be getting paid. Like, for example, this year, Minkah Fitzpatrick is a $21.3 million cap hit. Next year, he's a $22.3 million cap cap hit, and the year after that, he's a $24.4 million cap hit. So, I mean, he's signed for long term, but if he wants to keep making that money, because again, he has time to still be very good in the NFL, he's got to keep showing it. And last year, and I think everyone acknowledges it wasn't his fault. It was more so because they had to ask him to be in a million different places, and there were a lot of factors there. But I do think that he has to show that it wasn't his fault and be productive this year and be productive at an all-pro level. And then, it'll those kind of questions will go away, and he'll absolutely be part of the plans of the future with Omar Khan.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be part of the future, but it's just a matter of, he made his name in this league and started to make even, I would say, a Hall of Fame case for himself based on his ball hawking prowess. And so if that goes away, then he's not what he once was. So, I do have confidence that he can return to form, but there should be some pressure on him. And by the same token, I look at both the quarterbacks as having massive pressure on them in different ways. Like, Russell Wilson, if things don't work out here, this might be his last chance to be a starter. On the flip side, if he has a great season, he could set himself up to make $15-20 million a year on his next contract, maybe even, stabilize the situation with the Steelers. Justin Fields very similarly, where those preseason games, he's not just auditioning for the Steelers to be their starting quarterback at some point. He's also auditioning for the other 31 teams. And if the Steelers don't sign him in the preseason to an extension, which I think would be a prudent move, he's going to be a free agent at season's end. And what happens to him? Does he get another opportunity? Is it a case like we saw with Mitch Trubisky and so many others, where the less you play, the better the league thinks you are, and will just simply sitting out a season help him earn a starting job next year? Or is he going to be a guy that, as quickly as the league moves on, becomes an afterthought, and guys push him down the depth chart and they forget about him, and he's out of the league or missing his opportunity to be a starter? So, I think that both quarterbacks absolutely should feel a level of pressure if we're having this discussion about guys with most pressure on them.
Absolutely. We'll get to see who does feel the most pressure when the players are due report today. I believe 10 a.m. is when they start rolling in. We'll be there before then, kind of setting up at St. Vincent College. Mike, thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, Chris, thank you for allowing me to get into it with you. It's been fun. You could find me on Twitter at Mike DeFabo, and of course, you can read all of my stuff on The Athletic.
Absolutely. He's Mike DeFabo. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. Back here tomorrow as we get our first reactions from what we hear from the Steelers as they report to training camp here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.